I'm in my power, the more everything can be empowered. It's not a personal thing. You can't be powerful on your own. You're part of a bigger thing. We're out of balance culturally, and so we all need to be bringing the feminine back in to our personal lives and into our collective life in order for that masculine to be really healthy as well.
Hi, I'm Amisha, and this is episode 12 of the Future is Beautiful podcast. I'm recording this intro today in Ahmedabad, India, at Gandhiji's ashram where he lived for 12 years. I've just been meditating in his wife Kasturba's room on the conditioned role of the feminine in society, which is relevant to today's interview. You'll hear more about life at the ashram in the next series. It's impossible to find a quiet place here, but I hope you enjoy the sounds of birds, people, and life in the background. This is the last episode in this series, and we'll now take a break to focus on raising funds through our Patreon campaign to keep making the podcast. We intend to be back in 4 weeks after raising just enough to cover the costs of our team, Lucy, our writer, and Jack, our sound editor, who do a huge amount of work per episode. If you're enjoying this podcast, please get over to www.patreon.com/Amisha and get involved. This week, my guest is musician Boe Huntress. I find her music captivating as she tackles important issues through her songs, and they have a resonance of truth to them, where she has a way of putting the unsayable into words. Our conversation is mostly about the cycles of life, from the menstrual cycle to the seasons to the cycle of the moon, as well as the cycles of light and darkness that we face within. To give you a feel of Boe's music, we start this episode with a taste of her song Can't Take Mine, which we discuss in our conversation. It's a song about sexual violence to women. I hope that you enjoy this interview and look forward to coming back with series 2 soon. Thank you for all of your incredible support over this series. I've really enjoyed bringing these inspiring people and their stories and ideas to you. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community, or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful.
Rape is the war we are running from. Another lucky escape, working on the streets alone at night. Why can't I feel safe under the stars? This is my home. Must I live in fear every day? It keeps us afraid of our beauty, hiding our fullness, ashamed of our sensuality. And why do we carry the shame of this? Isn't it yours? Isn't it yours? You can see my power is in my body. Is that why you want to take it? Your war is with yourself, won't you leave me out of it? Enough is enough, no more. 'Cause whether you're a stranger, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a husband, whether you're a father, you cannot take away from her the very thing that gave you life in the first place. No, you can't take that by force. So ask your heart if it exists anymore. So ask your heart if it still
joined by singer, songwriter, creative Boe Huntress. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
It was such a pleasure to see your show at Union Chapel this week, and it feels perfect that we're actually sat here having this conversation on the full moon, a lunar eclipse, and a blue moon, a blood moon. It's a big moon day, and we're recording this a week before it will go out. And I found your show, A Female Power, to be so resonant. I feel like that's the best word that I can use to describe it. And I was sat, I went to the show, and then I was sat in the concert, and I was with a bunch of the women in my life that are some of the most powerful, beautiful, creative women. And we were laughing because we couldn't help but kind of go, like loads of times after you said something or after a song. And then we were kind of laughing at the resonance, because it's not often that just that belly like, happens. And that's something that I've really felt when I listen to your songs, that you give voice to something that is hard to put into words, and is something that speaks so deeply to a feeling and a condition and a pain that I've experienced.
Wow, thank you. It's really beautiful to hear. I think it's amazing to have that feedback from the show, because I think when you create something, you are very close up with it, and then to actually get the feedback of what impact it has on people is just amazing. It's like, wow, this has a life beyond me and what I'm working with. It then has a whole new experience in the life of other people. It's just an amazing thing about being a creative, which I think that we all are, actually. Probably we're all creators. Well, definitely. And for me, the way that I work is to really tune in to something that's bigger than me when I'm making. So I don't know that I really have the language to say what that is, but the way that I understand it at the moment is the feeling of having a kind of mysterious creative partner that I'm working with, who is in essence mysterious. And so I seek her, him, it out, and the way that I do that is by accessing slightly different states to our kind of mode of everyday, mundane, kind of getting things done mode, that if I go into a different mode, a much more receptive mode, or you might call a right brain sort of a state, then I feel very able to communicate, maybe is the word, with this mysterious other. And it's both very much me and very much not me at the same time. It's a way of getting to know myself, or it's a way of knowing myself that I can't know otherwise outside of the creative field, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, I want to come back to this show, A Female Power, in more detail. But whilst you're talking about, this idea or this embodiment of being a creator, when did that start in your life? Have you always made things? Have you always had kind of voices or information that has spoken through you?
Yeah, I would say that as a child I was very sensitive, And it's hard to separate what's conditioned and what isn't. But I really enjoyed writing, so I would write a lot as a child, write stories and poems. And it wasn't until I was 16, I think, that I learned to play the guitar. I just picked it up and just sort of played around with it, and that's when I really found my medium in terms of writing songs, and that's when it really, just went from there, because that's a way that I can access the right brain state is through music. So picking up an instrument and just getting into a kind of altered state. It's like sometimes I'll just play something very monotonous or very repetitive and enter a different mode, as I said, and then the writing comes from there. So it does feel that for me music has been a pathway to create. And I've recently been returning to writing and poetry, but for years I've just had songwriting as my craft, because I absolutely love it as a craft. It's very I enjoy the limitation of it. So once you start making a song, you then suddenly have these boundaries that get created as you're making it. So the structure of it kind of forms as you're writing it, and I really like that.
Beautiful. When you started writing songs, did you know that you had to perform them?
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did feel that urge to share them. But I've been a very shy performer for most of my life, actually. And it's been quite a long journey for me to be very comfortable on stage. Just the level of vulnerability of sharing something that you've made. And I think the more that I've come to this realization of this is something coming through me, the easier it's been. So it becomes less personal. And I think when it felt very personal, like I've written this thing and now I'm going to share it with you, that just feels so vulnerable and so exposing. I had to go through a really big journey of just letting myself feel really vulnerable on stage. And now I absolutely still tap into that, like really include my vulnerability. And then something else can actually happen where there's also that bigger presence that is holding the vulnerability in me as well.
And the vulnerability is there in the content, in the subject matter of what you're sharing, and the stage presence is definitely there too. On Sunday you had these gold sequined catsuits on and were like shining that female power.
I mean, it's just so fun to be able to do that, to kind of play with form. We are, all of us, kind of a masterpiece. Each one of us is a masterpiece, and I'm getting to that point in my life now where I can just really enjoy being who I am and not having to shrink, and also not having to inflate. And there's somewhere really in the middle of those, well, it's not probably in the middle, it's another place actually, where you just fully are yourself, and that seems to be life-giving to other people. And that's when you know that you've kind of hit that place, is when other people feel really opened and other people feel really empowered by you completely taking or being in your power and not going into the deflation or inflation. But that's something that's taken me a while to find.
How would you explain the deflation and the inflation? It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I see it like two sides of the same coin, really. So the one side being, I'm not good enough, I'm yeah, I'm really shit, or I'm not good at things, or that whole narrative. And then the other side being, I'm the best, I'm gonna be better than everyone else, and I'm really, really great. And we can kind of flip between these two modes, but they're really the same thing. And I think sometimes we feel that it's kind of a virtue to be in this hiding mode, in this mode of I'm not good enough and I'm just going to stay quiet over here. But actually it's just as egotistical as the more what we would call egotistical state, which is I'm better than you. It's coming from the same place. Yeah, if that makes sense.
And the power is that place in the middle where we're not going to either of those sides, and where we're just able to be who we are without the fear of shining kind of our light and being strong, and also with the humility.
Yeah, and for me to get to that place, I have to include the other places. So for me to include the part of me that feels really small, the part of me that feels really collapsed or not good enough, I like to visit that place and really welcome her and give her voice. And then similarly the other side that's like, I want to be better than everyone and really let her have her place and her voice as well. And so it's actually, strangely enough, by including them, that they don't then need to sort of act out externally, because they feel sort of seen and heard. And I think it's really like a similar way of interacting with young children. You know, if they feel seen and heard, then they can be kind of solid in themselves. But if they're not being listened to and they're not being seen or noticed, then they're going to make a lot of noise to get the attention. And actually we're just exactly the same as adults.
Yeah.
But we disguise that.
And we've got all these children inside of us, that we have to, like nurture and listen to and hold in order to kind of be united in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us about this show and where the concept and the desire came from, the vision.
It's something I've been working on for a long time, not in the format of the show, but it's really been a culmination of the work I've been doing for a number of years. So I've been working with groups of women for about 7 years now, I would say, and we've been looking at the cycles of the moon and how that links to menstruation cycles, and also how that links to archetypes, feminine archetypes, actually feminine and masculine archetypes, and how all of that can work together in terms of looking at a cyclical way of being. And so this show has come out of working with groups of women, and we've really been looking at, well, what do I feel like during this part of my cycle? You know, what do I feel like when I'm ovulating? What do I feel like when I'm premenstrual? And really like building a picture, a more collective picture, like everybody has their own particular flavour to it, but really getting that there's something that we're sharing here, and really starting to value that, because as we know, it's not been something that's been valued culturally. So there's been a lot of narrative around curse, around menstruation, and it's something that's still very taboo. It makes people very uncomfortable to talk about. And it's something that generally we just don't talk about, and it's kind of invisible. And for me, that comes out of the idea that the norm is to be consistent in a kind of way where you just are the same all the time. And actually what the cycle shows me is that we change all the time, and actually day to day. So the cycle, you would have roughly 7 days in each sort of season of that cycle, but each day of that season is different to the next as you're moving closer to the next moon or the next phase. And actually just starting to learn, well, what is the value of changeability? What is the gift of that? And how might that actually have a real purpose in the way that the world works? And obviously when you look at the natural world, that's how the natural world is. We have, you know, if you look at the life of a tree, it grows its leaves, it has its fruit, and then everything falls down and starts to compost back into the earth, feed the roots, and it all happens again year by year. And we do that kind of process on lots of different levels. So we do it over the year as well, we do it over the month, we do it in the space of a day and a night. Mm. And so for me, just really wanting to bring this work around the valuing of cyclical ways of being, and within that to value feminine ways of being or woman ways of being that have been completely suppressed and not valued or even demonized.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was at your show, like, oh God, we've got so far to go. And then, you know, I think where I've come from, which is like, I used to work in politics, and then it was like, you have to perform at the same level every single day, and so much of society is in that particular way of being. So if you've got cramps, if you're feeling that tiredness that can come, that aching, it's like, okay, take the paracetamol, like get on with it, like don't let anyone know that this is happening. And you know, now I'm in a place where I've just been working for 5 months on a project with some men, and they know my cycle now. It's kind of like in their diaries, basically. And of course, in a banter kind of, oh well, you're going to be scary on those days kind of thing, and I've had to be like, no, I'm not scary on those days. Like, I'm tapping into like wisdom and something in the collective feminine on those days. Yeah. And like, I need time by myself, and I need to slow down on those days, and you know, I don't want to do phone calls and meetings on those days. I want to be by myself or in soft space. And it's really still hard to ask for those things when you're working in any kind of normal environment. When I'm just doing like working as a kind of doing my intuitive therapy sessions and teaching yoga, it sort of becomes a bit easier to create that spaciousness. But when you're on a project, it's like, well, everything's designed with like deadlines and kind of dates that things have to happen, and everyone's cycles are at different times. And on this project, you know, there's been five men, 4 women, and we have a circle every week, and all the women share where, like, you know, I'm bleeding or I just stopped bleeding, and it's been really amazing as the men have been like, oh, and they're getting used to that language. But we still have so far to go.
Yeah, we do, we really do. And I keep using this word value, but it seems to me that it's something that we don't value. It's about what we do and don't value culturally. So there's a whole like realm or way that we just is completely missing from our cultural way of being. And so what women can tap into during the bleed time is, you know, a lot of women will talk about their sense of spatial awareness changing, and which can manifest just as kind of being a bit clumsy or like bumping into things. But actually it's about the fact that you've entered a different state of being where actually all of your attention is going somewhere else. So your sensitivity levels go really up, and your sense of smell, your sense of taste, just everything is completely heightened. And I think that this is it's a time where we are able to access information in a way that we can't at other times. We're coming really close to the mystery and the mysterious realms. And so actually what that time is for, it is for the whole of society. It is a time to be accessing information that is for the whole community. And that's something that we don't understand culturally how to want even. We haven't been interested in it because we haven't seen how that actually works and operates. We have all of these qualitative ways of understanding what's good for us, and we haven't actually yet discovered that there's a gift there that is so ready and waiting to serve us. And in the show, one of the things I mention is talking about nomadic tribes, ancient tribes that would have that kind of council of women who, when they were bleeding, like that was understood that this is the time when you can access information. So if you're a nomadic tribe, what's really important is knowing where the buffalo are, because that's your source of food. So they would, at this time, dream a collective dream, all sleep together and receive the information about where it is they need to go next.
The heads in the centre.
Yeah, sleeping with their heads together in the centre. And so that's a really obvious way. So then all the tribe would be like, oh yeah, this is really great. Yeah. because now we're going to eat.
Yeah.
So it was a really direct way for them to see how that works. And I think in our culture now, we haven't got that model at all. But actually, I mean, it's something I'm trying to set up at the moment, is having a red tent space where we can actually start to do some experiments around this, around what happens when women who are bleeding sleep with their heads in the centre and dream dreams, and what about tuning into the guidance of our dreams, and really asking, like, what do we need to know right now in these times?
I hope that you do that. I've dreamt of that, like having a kind of urban space in London that you can just go and kind of like check into during your cycle, and have all the softness that you need, and other women, and get to dive into that collective space.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not, I mean, it's so wonderful to be, for me it's the space of the lover archetype when you're on your bleed, so you become very sensitive, as I said, but also very much like you want to commune with everything. You want to come very close to textures, and for me it's almost like being on sort of psychedelic drugs in a way. It's everything. You can just sit for hours and watch smoke billowing, or very kind of contented and blissful, but also like really coming very, very close to your experience, and there being something about how we've seen it as this sort of time just to sort of get through, or like, oh, poor you, and you just need to rest, and and actually for me just being like, no, there's a real gift in this. For me personally, I can go into ecstatic states with it, so that's an amazing gift for me personally, and there's also this collective gift as well. And also just wanted to say about the premenstrual time, because I think that's really interesting too. As you said, there's this whole, oh, she's going to be scary, and that whole narrative we've had around women being bitches when they're premenstrual, and being moody and being unreasonable. And for me, it's actually almost the opposite of that, that when they hit that premenstrual point in their cycle, they are actually getting closest to their truth. So I always talk about it as when the ocean pulls back and you see everything that's underneath. So you see all the rocks, you see all the things that were hidden.
The veil's lifted.
Yeah, and you can't hide anymore. And you might try, because, we're all socially conditioned to be polite. So you might try to be nice and good, but you actually can't not you can't hide the truth. It just comes through, and I just think this is wonderful because it's needed. The truth is needed, and for me, this is where there is real capacity for fierce love, the kind of love that is about saying no to what doesn't serve life and what doesn't serve the soul and what doesn't serve the community. And actually, if we were functioning in this way as women, which we sort of slowly are, we wouldn't be putting up with what's going on in the world. You know, we would just be saying no, and we'd be tearing this stuff down with the force of that energy. And again, it's like, this is really necessary. This energy is not about me being a bitch. This is not about me being unreasonable. This is about me being completely loving and completely sane, actually, because the insanity is the opposite. The insanity is what we're doing to the planet and to each other in these ridiculous ways that don't make any sense. And here I am going completely mad because that doesn't make sense. And I'm going to keep being mad until somebody listens to me, or until I can actually break this down. And so it's quite a destructive energy, and we need it.
And culturally, it's become this, like, you know, there, dear.
Yeah.
And like hysterical, loon, and these are like, you know, words that you literally talk to, you know, the cycles, and we use that to belittle the wisdom and the power in that rage, and that it's not like women making a fuss. There is so much going on in the world right now for us to feel that rage for.
Yeah.
And, you know, I imagine if we lived in a society where there weren't innocent children dying all over the world, where people weren't starving to death of poverty, where there wasn't war, where there wasn't all this focus on having big weapons and all of this stuff, the plastic in the ocean, all of it, then probably we'd be all quite chilled during those days. But it is like we tap into that rage and the warrior.
Yeah, absolutely, which has been completely wiped from our kind of collective energy. We don't have, I mean we do, but it's been very repressed, the warrior energy, very taboo for women to be in that energy, to be really fierce and uncompromising. It's something that we've been very conditioned to be nice. And I think a large part of that has been this hold over us to be sexual objects, really, that there's been such a strong narrative around us being beautiful and desirable and pretty, but the warrior isn't any of those things. And she doesn't care that she's not, because she's serving something much bigger than that. She's serving the heart, and but she's there. What I'm looking for culturally is these places where she's really visible in society, and also the shaman archetype, who sort of sits opposite her in the map that I work with, the sort of priestess, who is the one who's kind of overseeing the soul life. And so for me, the cycle is actually a spiritual path. And you know, we have all of these heroic stories, the hero's journey, that kind of myth of going out and achieving something or conquering something or finding something and then coming back. Actually, for me, that's a very masculine path. I don't mean that it's only for men. I mean that's a masculine story. And for me, the feminine version of that doesn't need to go anywhere, because she's going in spirals, she's going in circles. She can just stay in one place and she will travel deeply, deeply, deeply around and around and around and around. And again, like, that's a myth, or that's a sort of narrative we haven't had in our cultural stories in the same way as this kind of hero's journey.
And it's one that men also can traverse and using their feminine. So can you talk us through the map? I know you've mentioned all the archetypes, but just to make it really clear.
Yeah, I'd love to. And yeah, just to say as well that when I talk about masculine and feminine, I'm not talking about men and women. There is this distinction between they are energies, they are equal and opposite poles that are accessible to all people.
Yeah.
And as we know, we've lived in a patriarchy for so long that, and what that means, I think, is that we have valued masculine ways of being over feminine ones. And as we know, men don't do well in patriarchy either. So it's not about men doing things to women necessarily, it's about what is it that we're valuing and what kind of, just it all being on one end of the polarity that we're kind of appreciating. So, just to clear that up, that it is really accessible to any person. Yeah. And obviously gender in itself is a thing that doesn't work for a lot of people at all. So for a lot of people, you know, being defined as a woman or a man doesn't work. And so talking about these energies, it's this kind of spectrum that we can play around with, actually, I think. And it's been really interesting for me to really make an inquiry into my masculine energy as well as my feminine, and to be developing both in a healthy way. So for me it's about balance, and it's about, we're out of balance culturally, and so we all need to be bringing the feminine back in to our personal lives and into our collective life in order for that masculine to be really healthy as well. Absolutely. And I mean, this is something that we talk about actually a lot with different guests on this show, and yet it's interesting, one thing that I've really noticed, because I alternate between male and female guests, and the male guests, those episodes are listened to twice as much as the female guests. Wow. Partly it's because the men that I've had on the show so far are more well known, but then I question, well, why are they more well known? Because the work of the women that I've been talking to is incredible, but maybe they just haven't had the same platform. And so there is this interesting thing about how, where we give voice and how we allow for these different stories to come out, and if as women we're not going about getting our message out in with a masculine driven kind of way, that it becomes harder to hear. And so just kind of, I just find that really interesting where we're at with that this understanding of our feminine is definitely rising in women and in men, and quite quickly and in quite a big scale. I did a Priestess training a few years ago, and until then a lot of the things that I now understand to be my power were things that I thought were my faults and things that I needed to keep hidden and to not show and to be ashamed of. And I've just noticed more and more how the narrative around re-examining the emphasis on the masculine, re-examining the toxicity around what masculinity is, because I believe that the masculinity that we are giving voice to isn't even the masculinity that we're talking about. It is toxic. There are these other elements in it, and yeah. It's like, do we actually know what the pure masculine energy is and the pure feminine energy? You know, what they are in their wholeness and in their healthiness. Can we know that? Because there are no examples. Yeah. I mean, that's why I work with archetypes, because I feel that you can access the pure energy through archetypes.
Yeah.
And by that I mean things that exist in our collective unconscious that we can kind of visit in a way, who holds an energy of something that we might not have seen or experienced otherwise, and they come through stories and myths and songs. And so that's how I feel that I know what it is, just through visiting something, again, quite mysterious, but that feels real. But what I think I've been working with personally is I've inherited all of these ways of being from an unhealthy culture. So all of my ways of relating and all of my ways of being, every model that I've seen is unhealthy. And so how to travel from that to this healthy model, which I do actually also know, but I haven't seen in the same way or to the same extent that I've seen the other. So that's the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I work a lot with archetypes and with mythology, especially kind of, I work with the Hindu goddesses, but not exclusively. But then what I find is that sometimes the ways that have kind of lit up in me through uncovering those stories within me, it's still like how they get met in the world, because we're creating space for those to be living stories in each of us, for the mythology to essentially wake up those parts of us in the very kind of core of our beings, like in our cellular body, so that we can embody what those archetypes are, and then we're met with where the world is, and so then there becomes a kind of tension of that purity and the reality of where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's quite a tension to hold, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 Shall I say about the map?
Please.
That you asked about, and I can tie in the archetypes with it as well. So perhaps if I talk about it as a creative process, because that's how I work with my cycle a lot of the time, is creatively, as an artist, as a human. So starting from the point of, say, the end of the bleed, so starting with the pre-ovulatory time, that for me is this time of kind of beginning and vision and kind of drive and passion, and for me it's really about life force. So this is the warrior archetype space, and it's the waxing moon, so after the moon's been dark and it's just starting to reappear, it's the beginning of this time where you really start to take responsibility for your life force and for your place on this planet. And that's something that I think, again, culturally we haven't been given. We don't have this kind of initiation where we take the responsibility of our lives from our parents onto ourselves and have this very conscious choosing of, now I'm going to be the one who is directing this life, and I'm the carrier of this life, and this life is my responsibility. So that's something that I've really been working with a lot, is like actually taking responsibility. It's empowering, and it's terrifying to the parts of us that are still children. So that's a lot for me about that energy, and the warrior being very dedicated to her path and being very focused. So some people say that the warrior archetype is a virgin goddess. Not that, doesn't mean that she's not sexual or she's not having sex, but that she's devoted to herself, rather than, say, a mother archetype who might be, in relationship and very relational. The warrior archetype is really focused, and she's finding her path through through life, and she's totally dedicated to it. And for me, this energy, it's really important to be very connected to one's anger, to one's rage, and again, that's about force, that's about life force, that's about energy and passion and vision and clarity, also being able to communicate and speak your truth. So it's all of this like really, really important stuff, and it's just something that we haven't had, and I just wish that we had kind of warrior training as young girls, you know, like physically being able to actually fight, because in this world we are not safe, and so that's needed on the physical level, but also psychologically. How do you hold your own space? How do you become a master of your energy? How do you stop other people coming into your space, and how do you bring your vision in what you were talking about, the men and the women, and that maybe it's been easier for men to kind of take that space, claim their space publicly, and for women that's something that we don't learn easily, or we're not taught. So yeah, the warrior being really like, I'm here and I'm taking my space. So she's quite outward in the sense that she's quite engaged with life and the world and her place in it. But for me, the warrior part is kind of interesting because that suggests war in a sense. Whereas I see her much more as a kind of protectress, like she's protecting what is vulnerable or what can't protect itself. She will fight for what she loves, but she will be protecting it rather than aggressing, if you know what I mean. And she's always motivated by her connection to her heart and to love. So, and if you're looking at it in terms of a stage of life, it's that point of leaving childhood and starting your kind of maidenhood or your adulthood. And then you come around to the full moon, to the mother archetype, and ovulation time. And this is, so if you're looking at it creatively, the warrior archetype will have been a kind of visioning and a kind of getting clear. And then the mother archetype is this kind of the fullness of reaching your vision, of bringing your gift to the world. And so it being a time really of abundance and fullness and overflowing and letting this kind of love just pour out of you. And again, it being quite outward and being quite relational. So a lot of women say at this time when they're ovulating that they have this capacity to do so much and to really multitask and to really be there for people and to really just sort of be a superwoman, sort of unbelievably able to do so much. And that's something that we really have to keep an eye on, because if we're doing that to the detriment of ourselves, then we will sort of pay for it later. But it's, for me, I always say it's about filling yourself up with that energy, and then whatever overflows, it's like fair game to kind of let that spread out, but like making it sustainable, so making it receiving. And so that's a big part of it for me, is that she can receive, the mother archetype can receive love as well as give it. She's in that receptive mode of being able to receive praise, love, adoration, being seen. You know, we talked about being on stage, and for me, I can really let myself now, it's quite a recent thing for me, let myself be seen and let myself be appreciated. So that's a way that I'm receiving, but I know that that's also a giving, and it's the same thing somehow, that also when you give, you know that you're also receiving, and it's the two things are the same thing. So that's really the mother archetype. And for me, she's really like an antidote to the inner critic. So she plays a very important role of being able to love unconditionally, and she can love all of those parts of us that we don't actually love. And as we were talking about earlier, all of these kind of children within ourselves, it's like finding that mother archetype in yourself that can actually be with those parts that feel completely wretched and completely worthless and can't be shown to anyone or believe they can't be. And she's the one that has space for them all. Yeah, and then you move around, and then the moon starts to descend, goes into the descent, and starts turning into the dark, and that's when it gets really interesting, because that's when it gets quite taboo culturally, because then we start to become very internal. So we've been quite external in the ascent, and then we become very internal, and we become very inward focused, and so it can be a time where you actually need to separate a bit from all of the doing and all of the people, and you hit this kind of editing phase. Is something, creatively I see it as an editing phase where everything in your project that you've been doing up until that point, you start to be like, actually that doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and that needs to go, and that doesn't serve. And if you're talking about this as a spiritual path, then what you're doing is actually seeing all the parts in yourself that aren't serving you, or the things that you're doing in your life that aren't serving you. So maybe patterns or ways of being. So it can be a very painful time. As we were saying before, you see the truth and you can't ignore it anymore. And you start to really identify what isn't working. And so that can be quite frightening, and we're quite attached often to who we are and what we're doing, so we don't like it. But of course it is in our highest purpose or service of our lives. And again, as I was saying, collectively that's the time to really say no, basically, to what doesn't work. So for me, this archetype here is the witch, shaman, priestess archetype, and she has this kind of much bigger vision. So she's connected to the other realms much more, and I think it's because she's facing death. She knows that she's going to die. So if you're talking about a stage of life, this is getting towards the end of life and sort of menopause time, really, where you start to not care in the same way, because you're like, well, actually I've lived long enough to know that other people's judgments of me aren't what's going to define my life. I'm going to live my truth. And so that's also part of why that energy is quite ballsy in a way. It's quite like, fuck it, I'm just going to do what is true to me, and I'm not going to play small anymore, and I'm not going to pretend. And so that's that energy. But also she's very intuitive and very, she can kind of see, she has a sense of being able to go into the unknown because she has a knowing that's an intuitive knowing. So it's like she knows enough for the next step, and she doesn't really need to know much more. So it's a different kind of knowing to knowledge. It's a kind of, I know this. And it's quite irrational, so it might not make sense, but it makes total sense in the long term or in the bigger picture. So then all of that's the waning moon, and then all of that gets taken into the dark moon, into the bleed, into the death time. And they say that there's a kind of death point, like 2 days or anything between 2 days and 2 hours before the bleed, where some kind of hormone stops giving out and you hit a kind of despair. And this is a moment where it's really helpful to try to remember that, this is my death moment. And you feel like you want to die because you are dying, and so all of those things that you identified at this point, now you're letting them go, and you're entering that, can I really let go of my attachment, and can I really do this death, which of course is transformation. and then you go into the bleed, and then once you've kind of gone through that like really difficult moment, then is when you can go into the surrender and the release and the renewal, and you go then into the lover archetype that we were talking about before. And yeah, I feel like I've spoken for a long time.
Well, it's a lot that happens.
It's a lot that happens.
And like you said, I mean, we can go through these cycles in a day, in a lifetime, but as women, this is basically our lives, like every month. And it is that, it does have all of those different nuances to it. And it is a lot that we go through. So then this idea that we would show up in a consistent way, it's bonkers after we've just heard all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Quite often I think women are often told that they're too much. I don't know if that's something, a sense of being too much, too emotional, too much, and there is a sense of like, yeah, I'm everything. I'm just all of it. I'm just absolutely everything. Oh, yes, I am too much because I'm all of it.
Totally. And then men can tune into the cycle of the women that they're close to, or they can go sort of direct to the moon and go through it that way. Yeah.
Which I just recommend so much. I mean, I just get so much out of the cycle that I can't imagine being without it. I think, and also I think that men probably are on a cycle, because I do think that we are cyclical beings. I think that that's part of the deal of being on this planet, that we are. So I wouldn't be surprised if men were on a cycle, and whether that cycle is lunar or whether it's solar or what, I don't know. But men obviously don't have the same bodily indicators of where they are. So again, that's something that I want to do, is set up a group where men are charting their emotional state and their state of being, and just starting to see, is there a pattern here?
Yeah, because I guess I've heard those two different things, that either men sort of sync up with the women around them, or they are part of the solar cycle, and it's just a completely different cycle, and probably it's not one or the other. Probably there are some on one, some on another, and then everyone in between, and
it's also partly where you put your attention, isn't it? Because we could probably put our attention on being on a solar cycle and work with that.
And we can put our attention into just being one archetype and kind of use it to sort of override the others. Definitely for a certain amount of time, but it feels...
Well, for me, then that begins to feel a bit imbalanced.
Yeah. It kind of goes, you can do it maybe for a little, and then it sort of goes a bit over the edge. It's like,
Yeah, you suddenly need another energy to come in. Yeah, get a bit sort of stuck down one road.
Yeah, but allowing that process, and then using that process to bring something to your work, to your creativity, to your family, to your relationships, and allowing all of that cycle to exist and all of those archetypes to come out. It makes life so interesting and beautiful.
Yeah, it really does. And I think there's just something about how afraid we are of these unknown ways of being. We're so afraid of the unknown, we're so afraid of mystery, we're so afraid of emotions and vulnerability and all of these things that sit in that feminine polarity. And we've been so kind of, we have to know everything, we have to control everything, we have to be going at this speed which is so fast, and actually to learn to appreciate what happens when you slow down, to appreciate what happens when you sit completely in the unknown, or what happens when you face death and you go into death or grief, which of course we all will face in our lives in many different ways. And we've got no tools then to know how to actually be with pain, how to actually be with grief. It's just so needed.
And this education piece is strongly there in your music, in the things that you sing about, a lot of the kind of taboo areas of womanness, of femaleness, and some of the songs, you know, Can't Take Mine has really struck a nerve with me when I've listened to it, and the articulation of women's powers being in their bodies, the songs about rape and sexual assault, and yeah, being able to use your voice in that way. Where did that, you know, do you sit and you think, I want to write a song about rape, and then see what happens, or how does that happen for you?
Yeah, that song particularly came when I was feeling a lot of rage about feeling frightened, you know, feeling not safe on the planet, feeling that I can't just walk down the street unafraid, and actually this is my home, you know, that I have every right to be here and to not fear. So I'd had a kind of frightening experience, and I was feeling really angry about that, and then just tapping into, you know, when you work with women and you sit in a lot of women's circles, you hear the most horrendous stories. I mean, you can't pretend that it doesn't go on when you work with women. And in every group of women I've sat in, there's such a high proportion of women who have experienced rape and sexual assault, so much higher than the statistics are, I think.
And they're 1 in 4.
Yeah.
And so
exactly. And actually, I think probably every woman has experienced sexual assault of some kind, or something really damaging, even if
objectification.
Yeah.
If nothing physical.
Yeah.
That feeling of being uncomfortable or unsafe.
Exactly. And then there's also the whole area of how actually we haven't been educated and this comes back to the warrior training, we haven't been educated around sexuality in terms of when you are having sex, listening to your body, because every time you go over your own boundary, you know, if your body isn't saying yes, then the experience in the body is one of rape. If you're not actually open and you're not actually saying, you're not actually wanting this, then your body experiences rape, and you might in your mind be like, oh well, I just went along with that, so that's not really their fault, that, you know, the other person's fault. But you will feel it on that level of a self-betrayal, or that level of a painful experience in your body. And you know, I just feel that we've all done that probably. I know I have.
And then when you say your body, it's like, well, you know, that's a whole body, and so some parts, like our sexual organs, might be active and seem like they're saying yes, but if our heart's not, if something else isn't, then overall our body isn't saying yes. But exactly. It's hard to know, because I don't think we're ever taught how to be embodied either.
Yeah, I agree. How to really, be in touch with our bodies and really listen and really value it as well. And for me, a big part of the work around the warrior training is about getting to know your yes and your no, and to really feel that in the body. Like, I have a no at the moment, I have a yes, and not to judge those, because we judge it. We think, well, I should think this, I should say yes, because that's a good thing to do, or that's what they want, or da-da-da.
Comes back to the conditioning.
Yeah, and that's not just in the sexual realm, that's in all of life. We're overriding all the time our no.
Yeah, that's even like, you know, can I allow myself to stay at home today because I'm bleeding and I feel like I need space? It's like, no, but I should go and have that, do that, I shouldn't cancel this, you know, that kind of, it's, everything.
Yeah.
What we eat, what we buy, kind of the bombardment of advertising that we're subject to all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could just be like animals. I mean, we are animals. And you don't see, you know, like cats are such a good one because they just do what they want and they don't do what they don't want. And, you know, one of my songs is called Jungle Queen, and one of the lines in it is, I could live like a jungle. And there's just this whole idea of, actually, I could just be that instinctual. I could just completely follow my instincts, completely. And actually, if we were all acting instinctively, I think everything would work. I just feel that we would all be in a kind of harmony. You know, it wouldn't be about like, oh, I've done what I wanted to do, so I let that person down. It would probably be the right thing for that person too. You know, this sense of what you see in the natural world of a kind of, when a jungle or a habitat works, everything is just doing itself, being itself completely, naturally and instinctively, and it all works together to create an environment where life can thrive.
And we are part of the natural world. It
Yeah.
seems ridiculous because it seems like the natural world is something that is very far away from London and something that, you know, you can only experience through watching Blue Planet or going on a far out expedition. But this is the natural world. This is just one I don't have that word. One version of it.
Yeah, and that's the thing about connecting with the cycle. You're connecting with your naturalness. That is a natural, it's a natural state, it's a natural rhythm, and being part of the natural worlds.
What words can you share with one of our friends that might be listening that has fear towards expressing themselves, towards stepping outside of the dominant story, towards unleashing their creativity, towards being seen and heard?
Yeah. Well, it is really frightening. And I think that's the thing, is that if you are going to be who you really are and live your fullest life, which we all want to do desperately, you're going to have to make friends with fear, and you're going to have to accept it as a partner. And that's not an easy thing to do, but sometimes I will have conversation with fear, my fear or fear itself, and again, I find the more that you welcome something, the more that you give it room and you give it space, the less control it has over you and the less frightening it becomes. And the other thing is that fear is also one side of a coin, and on the other side of that coin is excitement, passion. So whenever you do anything, well, speaking for myself, whenever I do anything that I'm passionate about, that I really want, I'm terrified. The two things do just come together. So actually, if you're feeling fear, it's such a good sign. It's a sign that you are onto something. So the thing that you're afraid of is the thing to walk towards. And that is the heroic thing to do, and it's terrifying. And, you know, we're not meant to be fearless. I think we have this idea that if only I could get rid of my fear, I would be free. But that's not the meaning of courage. The meaning of courage is to feel your fear and to stand in it and to do it anyway. And everybody is with you. When you go to that place of, I'm really afraid of this, but I'm going to do it, you find that everyone is on your side, because we all know what that's like. We all know what it is to actually meet and overcome. We all have that desire. So there's this, you can actually kind of tap into a collective support of, I'm gonna do this scary thing. And there is actually a lot of support for you in doing that. And I really see us and hope for us as a world that that's what we at least some of us are doing together is actually realizing that we are so powerful in our ability to meet and love fear, and to open and to just keep opening and making space. And that's then what makes everything possible.
Yeah. You can be unafraid, but be with the fear.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because then you do what I find I do reach these kind of fearless states when I realise, oh, there is nothing to fear. But I only ever get there through walking with my fear, like, I'm afraid, I'm really afraid, I'm really, really afraid, you know, and staying with that until I get to a point of, actually, there's nothing to fear.
This process that you talk about of going through your fear, and in your show, a lot of it is in the underworld, and your music, a lot of it is in those darker places. It's another thing that in society, you know, we're these shiny, happy people, and the darkness is scary, and there are very few guides, and something that we have to go through often alone, and that there's still so much shame around. What's your experience and understanding of the importance of darkness?
For me, it's just so important. It's everything, really, that we have a shadow, and actually everything that's in the shadow or everything that's in the dark is really important for us. So the whole thing about going to the underworld for me is about reclaiming things that have been repressed and things that have been pushed down. So they might not actually be scary or dark or anything like that. It's just that they've been pushed away, they've been made unacceptable, they've been pushed into the unconscious, and so they seem kind of shadowy and frightening. And again, it's like that's where you have to go. You have to go to the thing that you're afraid of, and then you open it up and you go in there and you walk in the dark. You do have to walk in the dark to visit it, to start to interact. And for me, this is about relationship. So a lot of the feminine for me is about relationship, about relating. So you relate with it. You begin to relate with the dark. And this is something I've been doing on quite a literal level. I've been making friends with the dark, going for walks in the dark, being in Union Chapel in the dark on my own, and just being like, oh, just physiologically, just what happens in my body, the fear, the heart rate, the imagination, you know. And actually, what is it like to walk in the dark and then to get to know what is there? And for me, when I first started to delve into my shadow in this way, I discovered all sorts of wonderful things that I really wanted and really needed, you know, my assertiveness, or like a lot of it is really golden, actually. And for a lot of us, our sexuality is down there, is repressed. It's anything that has been shamed, as you said, everything that feels unacceptable. So a lot of our kind of being in a body, having bodily functions, you know, being smelly and messy and chaotic and not acceptable, our wildness is in there. And actually then when you go to it and you meet it, you realise that this is an ally and you need it for to be your full self. So it's just a wonderful discovery and exploration, but we have to be prepared to walk in the dark. And as you said, there aren't many guides, and it can be treacherous, you can get a bit lost there. So there is something about asking for guides or asking for guidance and asking for support, because the support is there. And I've found that whenever I step into the dark, there will be somebody or something that comes into my life. So again, it's about listening, and really listening and looking and having that intention of this is, I'm really saying yes to my full self, which has to include everything that is in the dark as well as everything that's in the light.
It comes back to our power.
Yeah.
That's how we live it, how we find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, power is such a difficult word because we understand it to be the kind of power that we see in our world, which is not power, it's domination, it's control, it's repression. And so to be discovering, well, what is power really? And what I'm finding is that the more I'm in my power, the more everything can be empowered. It's not a personal thing. You can't be powerful on your own. You're part of a bigger thing.
I love that, because in domination and control, that type of understanding of power means that everything else has to be below.
Yeah.
And in this sort of true sense of power and empowerment, there is space for everyone to be in that, and that to have this natural I can't say that word today.
What's the word?
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. It's a hard one.
Yeah. That in this space, everything responds to each other as it should. No, that's not what I say either.
For me, it's that everything has its place. Everybody and everything, as I was saying about the natural world, I feel that each individual has a certain gift, a certain way that is really needed. We really need each person to fully be who they really are. And if everybody is doing that, everything works. So if we are all living our true calling, whatever that is, however bonkers that might seem, even if your true calling is to kind of sit up a tree and, or to like peel, I don't know, it doesn't have to be useful in the way that we understand. But if everybody's living their true purpose, like their design, like you see how everybody has these skills that are unique to them. And so much of that maybe isn't recognised or valued in our culture, so it's just not, they don't think they can go there. But if they do, and if we all did, then I just feel that everything would work, that we all are holding a piece of the puzzle to make this incredible place that we live, this incredible planet, completely work and be the total wonderfulness that it could be, that it is, really.
The future that is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place to end. Thank you so much, Boe. I feel like to get the true flavour of what you're sharing, it would be so nice to end the show with a song. The song that comes to mind is You Are Enough, because that really speaks to our power, and it's a song that I have been listening to quite a lot recently and sharing actually with people in my life. Can you tell us a little bit about how that song rose up in you?
Yeah, it really came from this place of that we've talked about, of really loving all of the parts of oneself, so the parts that feel small and the parts that feel not good enough and the parts that need attention and need love and need reassurance. We just need so much reassurance and so much love and so much holding. So I decided I would write a song for this part of me that is young and fragile, and that's the song that I wrote, and it's been a really important song for me in rebuilding my sense of being enough. And yeah, it seems to resonate with people
It's the soft understanding of power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your website is boehuntress.com.
Yeah, boehuntress.com, yeah.
And your music is available on SoundCloud. And of course, for sale, you have an EP coming out.
Yeah, so for the show, we created 4 tracks of music that is now an EP. So it's called A Female Power, the EP, and it's just coming out at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. And here is You Are Enough.
You are enough when you wake up. You are enough when you're unproductive. You are enough when you're too scared. You are enough when you bring what you have. You are enough when you feel small. You are enough when you know it all. You are enough, brave enough to try. You are enough when you want to hide. I would go to the top of the mountains to bring you back into my arms where you belong, little one. And I would follow you up those cold mountains, oh, right to the top of your mind winds to bring you down home again. And ooh, everything is loving you, and ooh, everything is on your side, and you are not separate from the love inside. And ooh, everything is loving you, and ooh, everything is on your side, and you are not separate from this heart of mine. You are enough, though you're not like him or her. You are enough, though you're not even perfect. You are enough, though you get it wrong. You are enough, though you're not always strong. You are enough in all the ways of who you are. You are enough, though you think you should be more. You are enough in this moment. You are enough without atonement. I would go to the top of the mountains to bring you back into my arms where you belong, little one. And I would follow you up those cold mountains, oh, right to the top of your mind winds to bring you down home again. And ooh, everything is loving you, and ooh, everything is on your side, and you are not separate from the love inside. And ooh, everything is loving you, and ooh, everything is on your side, and you are not separate from this heart of mine, from this heart of mine, from the love inside. I know it doesn't feel enough, but this time you'll just have to trust me, 'cause I've been around now long enough to see that some things you don't have to believe. And ooh, everything is loving you, and ooh, everything everything is on your side. Ooh, everything is loving you, and ooh, everything is on your side. Ooh, everything is, ooh, everything is love.
Thank you for listening. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our community. If you loved this and would like to contribute to our Patreon campaign or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on community. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes so we can grow. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together.